Well, good morning. Good morning, everybody. And thank you very much to the RFG and the organisers, Casey, Stephen, and everybody else for inviting me to talk today. It's always a pleasure to talk to the Woven Finds group. Yeah, it's great to be here. I'm going to talk this morning about some weird little studs that show up, mostly detectorist finds, but have shown up in excavations as well, and try and contextualise them a little bit and just talk about them a little bit. But this bit of, if I can call it research, really it's just idle sort of searching through the database and thinking, oh, that's quite pretty and interesting. But this bit of research was largely inspired, I guess, by the work of Lindsay Allison-Jones, like a lot of work that we do. And her work on bell-shaped studs particularly. During the kind of pandemic and the lockdown 2020, 2021, when it was, I mean, I know a lot of people struggle, but it was a fabulous time in PAS because you just had time to actually look at the things on the database and work through those little jobs and bits and pieces that you'd rather do. And there were no finders coming in at all, so we could work on just the objects we had. So I spent a bit of time sort of looking at bell-shaped studs and sort of sorting through them, cleaning up the data. I'd seen what a mess the records were in, really, for bell-shaped studs. And of course, in PAS, we want our data to be accessible. We want it reasonably ready and right for further research. So data cleaning is an essential, if often sort of overlooked and, well, a never time for kind of task that we try and do. But it can be great fun, as it's doing those kind of tasks that the patterns and things start to emerge, and weird little things start to emerge. So it was while I was researching through bell-shaped studs that I looked at lots of other studs and pins and mounts and fittings all flashing before my eyes. But it was some curious little mounts that caught my attention. Oh, actually, just as an aside, when I was doing the research for this the other day and looking through the database and looking for lion stuff, I came across this rather wonderful little, well, it says a leopard, but leopard, lion, feline figurine with it doesn't mention it in the record, but it's actually got a bell-shaped stud that's used, as you can see on the right there. It's a bell-shaped stud used as some kind of plinth, or found in association with this figurine. So I've not seen that before. So that might be quite interesting for if there's anybody else besides Lindsay Allison-Jones and myself interested in bell-shaped studs out there for you to look at. But I digress. It was really these curious little zoomorphic mounts that caught my attention. What are they? They are typically called lion head studs, or if I can butcher my German, Löwenkopf, I think, in Germany as well. And what we're talking about, well, as you can see, they're little circular mounts, sort of domed, convex studs, really, not mounts, have this very stylized kind of male or lion head decoration. And they're characterized by these kind of successive rings in that dome that on which the mane and other features are depicted, topped with this kind of central lion mask with the eyes, the mouth and the tongue. The tongue is very distinctive, and this really distinctive kind of triangular shaped snout or nose on the top. All of them have an iron shank that is. I'll go back. Sorry, I've gone the wrong way. Hang on. All of them have an iron shank that is fixed in place with like a lead or lead solder. And I've superimposed this example here because the lead is still in place and you can still see the remains of the iron shank in the middle there. Lions, of course, just to contextualize a bit, lions, of course, are pretty ubiquitous in Roman stuff. But usually a lot more kind of, I think anyway, a lot more naturalistic kind of depictions, such as, the kind of monuments you can see here. This is kind of more typically how they're presented. Of course, we've got the famous example from Corbridge, and the sort of less famous example also from near Corbridge, from Shoreham Bray, from the big funerary monument there. I don't know what it was with Corbridge and lions, but it was obviously a thing there. And then, the really classical examples like this one from that's in Florence, that originally came from one of the gates. Which gate was it? It was the I forget where it's from now. From one of the gates. Porta San Lorenzo in Rome, and now in Florence. And you've got this sort of more kind of Greek style lion as well. there. So, very ubiquitous, and also in, smaller objects as well. We see them, and particularly on, these are all from our database. We've got sort of, actually they're not, the ring isn't from our database. I wish it was. It's a lovely gold ring, but that's, I think it's in the Getty, possibly. But you've got, lion intaglios, you've got lion spouts on these Samian ware here. These lovely lion plate brooches that I'd not come across before, actually. Again, very stylized though in this depiction, but the others tend to be more naturalistic. And I think we had the pleasure just a few weeks ago of in RFG of an online presentation from my colleague Laurie, where she was talking about this possible vehicle fitting here, where I think she said this was a lion as well. And also for just thinking about more about sort of decorative mounts and studs, we've got these presumably box mounts or here with a lion depiction as well. Again, a lot more naturalistic. Look at the eyes there. The eyes are quite similar to the studs, but a much more kind of lion-y lion, if you like, a less cartoony lion. But our lion head studs that we're talking about today, like I say, are a lot more kind of stylized in their presentation. They turn up in excavations all over the place, as far as I can see. First kind of noted, I think, in the early 20th century, or that's the first time that the earliest ones I could find were from the 1920s. I haven't had a really fantastic look yet, but those are the earliest ones. But it's really only in the 80s when people started to sort of, when a synthesis, I guess, was attempted, and that was in the publications from Skeleton Green in Hertfordshire, where 30 or so, I think, were recovered during excavations there. So they attempted, like I say, a little bit of a synthesis and a discussion in the publication. And I think they examined around about 75 altogether from various excavations, of which 55 had come from funerary deposits. And specifically, or it was argued that they were manufactured specifically to be fixed to small cremation caskets. As you can see in the depictions here on the left, that's the one from Skeleton Green, actually coming on this kind of lock plate as well, fixed onto a cremation casket. Not huge numbers, but then casket cremations aren't that common anyway. But the author of Skeleton Green, Partridge, argued that if it's accepted that each lion head stud was beaten out individually on a die, then it's probable that the studs from the various cemeteries were the work of regional craftsmen interpreting the work in their own particular way, though working to a basic model of the lion's head. I think that's broadly right. The form of the lion head stud suggests that it's related to, well, firstly related to function, and it's that functional purpose of these mounts that was the most important factor, rather than this kind of lion aesthetic. But you have to wonder whether the lion heads kind of, or that addition to them, that decoration, was kind of a bright idea that somebody had, that the form suggested a lion head, and somebody somewhere once added this decoration and it kind of caught on. But then alongside that, you've got to consider that kind of very common association in the Roman world between kind of funerary monuments and lions and all that as well. But as I say, this is a phenomenon, just going back to that slide, this is not just in Britain, this is in, across the continent as well. And like speakers yesterday, I haven't had much chance yet to look at the European material, but where I have had a quick look, Augusta Raurica is it's a great place to look for anything. It's one of those sites where if it was anywhere, it would be there. So, and those publications are mostly all online, so it's a really good resource. But yeah, and they were there, indeed, they were there in Switzerland, and they got a few lion head studs there, as you can see. And then there were some others as well from, I'm not even going to attempt that, Septfontaine Decks, maybe, Luxembourg. That were published in 1996. Again, very similar to the Skeleton Green examples on that kind of lock plate as well. So they were quite common, as far as I can see anyway. I say common, I mean, none of it's common, but, they appeared anyway and were widespread throughout kind of north and west of the empire, as far as we can tell. In terms of dating, well, obviously with PAS data, it's often quite a pointless exercise to think about dating when it's all coming from the plough soil. But the Skeleton Green authors presented their evidence, and I've combined that with a few other sites as well that I've come across. And as you can see, there's a pretty solid kind of sort of 1st century, 2nd century theme that's coming through. And I'm no expert, obviously, in Roman burial practices, but my kind of limited understanding of this is more or less that reflects that kind of shift from or the common sort of cremation burials in the kind of 1st, 2nd century. There's a bit of a shift towards inhumation in the later sort of 3rd, 4th century, I believe. Although the trouble is, when you look at the north, and we're supposed to be talking about, I should have apologised at the start and said this isn't really much about, the bits of it are about the north, but it's not really north focused. It's really the absence in the north that's important. And obviously the north is just weird, you know. In cremation here, we've got sites like Bruffham on the A66 and High Rochester, Bird Oswald, where, you know, cremation is persisting well into the 5th century, but there are no lion-head studs associated. Although you do get at Bruffham, particularly in the pyre material, they had heat-affected bell-shaped studs, which is quite interesting, but probably not that important today. But still, but yeah, the north is weird as always for these things. Now, I know I don't need to keep selling it to such an august audience as the Roman Finds Group, but the fabulous thing about PAS data now that there's so many more of these things being reported and recorded that that you can begin to ask bigger questions about them and begin to look at classification and things like that, and what kind of types we might have and how they compare, and all those kind of questions we can begin to ask. My data is a little bit out of date, really. I haven't looked at this too much, unfortunately, in the last couple of years. So I'm drawing on around about 100 or so PAS examples. There's about maybe 100 or so more from excavated context that I've identified so far. And I think there's probably maybe a dozen or 20 or so. I had a quick look this week that have been recorded since on PAS. So the number's growing all the time, but it's, you know, it's big data. It's good. You know, it's really useful, which means that I could have a little go at thinking about a bit of a classification, which is always fun. Now, I'm not going to suggest anything grand, but it quickly became apparent when I was looking at the studs that aside from the inevitable oddities, and there's always oddities, I always think of Donald McCreth's complete bastard types of trumpet brooches, Colchester brooches, sorry, which is fantastic. But apart from those oddities, there really is kind of, I think, a solid kind of three type classification we can sort of attempt, I think. As you can see, so I've drawn on as well, because we've done a lot of work in Durham PAS recently on Bronze Age lunula, which is completely irrelevant here today, except that Joan Taylor, who did a lot of work on these, had these fabulous, you know, when you're going to have a classification, you know, you have your type 1s and your type 2s, your type 4.ACs if you're Donald McCreth, but, you know, give it names as well. Let's make it fun again. You know, in the old days of archaeology, those, you know, we were talking yesterday about some antiquarians. It was a lot more fun. So I think, you know, you've got to give it names if you really want to have a typology that sticks. So I drew on Joan Taylor's work. So we've got our classical form, which is a lot more well defined. That's our type 1s, and there's about 60% of the examples on PAS database conform to this kind of this model, characterized, I think, anyway, by these kind of 3 rings. We talked earlier about one of the basic kind of characteristics of these studs is having these kind of rings. So I think that the type 1s, they have 3 rings. You can see the steps there, if you like, or rings that they're built on. The decoration, obviously, the lion's mane is on that 2nd step up, the face mask on the 3rd step, and then you've got the snout there, the triangular snout on the top. For type 2s, they only have 2 steps, as you can see. They seem to have a longer kind of skirt or a bottom bit there. The mane tends to be on that 1st step, and then the mask, and then the nose on top. And also for these type 2s, the decoration kind of varies a little bit. It's a little bit less well defined, a bit more vernacular maybe. So again, drawing on the lunula, it's a little unaccomplished maybe. And then my personal, and that's about 25% of what I could find. Overall, the type 2s account for about 35%. But then my personal favourite is what I've called the type 2Bs, or the wavy mane, or the engrailed mane. I'm going back and forth on this, I'm not sure. Engrailed seems to fit a bit more with unaccomplished and classical, but it is a wavy mane, so I'm not there yet. As I say, this is research in progress. But these are only about 10% or 9% or so of the examples we have. That's not many at all, really, in our data set so far. I think maybe there's 1 or 2 more I saw that I could add now, but they're characterised, as you can see, as the name says, by these kind of scalloped edges, these kind of the wavy mane around the edge. And also, look at this chap, he's really happy. He's got a big smile, his tongue's out, he's just loving life on his cremation casket. Yeah, they're my personal favourite. And actually, of all of them, probably the most naturalistic depiction, if lions smile. I don't know if lions smile or not, but you see what I'm getting at anyway. So that's a basic kind of typology that I'm attempting, I suppose. Talked about oddities. It's always worth looking at the oddities. I think the one in the bottom right there isn't really an oddity. I think it's a solidish kind of type 2, but it has got this little ring on the nose, which is interesting. Suggests another function, potentially, maybe, or some of the, as we'll see, some of the cremation caskets also have rings. You know, was there a ring through that? I don't know. Interesting. But the other oddities, we got these weird solid ones. Again, I think there's maybe 3 or 4 of these on the PAS database. I haven't seen any in excavated context. They seem to be solid copper alloy. The mane's kind of, you've got a big coiffured hairstyle going on sort of down the skirt there, with the iron stud in the middle. And then these others in the top right, I'm not even sure if these would qualify as lion head studs. They seem to have a lion mask on them. And what's interesting, they've got a copper alloy shaft instead of the copper alloy shaft instead of the iron shank on the back, which is quite interesting. It's always interesting to have a little look at distribution. Unfortunately, it tells us very little. I hope you can see these colours aren't great against this map. But they all seem to cluster sort of in the south and east. Like I said, this talk is supposed to be about northern finds, isn't it? The story here for northern lion head studs is that there aren't any, really. The furthest they get is sort of south of the Tees to North Yorkshire. There's one from around Carlisle, I think. If you know of any others from anywhere else, particularly up in Scotland, I haven't been through all the literature yet, as I say, but I haven't come across any. I'd be interested to hear if any come from hereabouts, as in the northeast region or further north indeed. Would be interesting to hear. Breaking it down into our types, again, it doesn't really tell us a great deal at this stage, except that when you think back to what Partridge said about sort of regional craftspeople producing them, I'm not sure that would necessarily apply. I mean, it may apply that probably was artisanal work, but when you're getting similar studs produced sort of on the south coast right up to York, it seems that they're being made in probably more production centres than just sort of more, less localised production centres, if that makes sense. The type 2s are a little bit, obviously there's fewer of them and they're a little bit more spread again, but a similar spread to the type 1s, except that the wavy manes, the type 2Bs, they seem to be more centralised, perhaps in the East Midlands. Maybe there you could argue for a more sort of regional production centre. I don't know. Again, it's very small bits of data really, so it's not ideal. There we are. So I think in terms of where to take this, I'm not really sure at the moment. It depends where I have time. What would be nice to do, it'd be nice to put something together for internal PAS guidance. I did something similar with bell-shaped studs because they have been recorded all over the place as mount studs, box fittings, furniture fittings. It's similar for bell-shaped studs. If somebody wanted to do more work, for line head studs, if somebody wanted to do more work on this, it'd be nice if they could come and find the data set quite easily. So internal recording guidance would be good for PAS. Might be quite nice. I don't know if the gods of the Roman Finds Group think it's worthy to do some kind of data sheet or something in the future, maybe. But it'd be nice to kind of spread the word on these. It'd be interesting to see if more examples can be found in excavations as well. But I just think they're quite fascinating. They're quite lovely little things. There's obviously a lot more that you could do in terms of thinking about why they're in cremations. Can we look at the cremation data and in terms of sexing the remains that are in there? Are they more prevalent on particular types of cremations or graves, and all those kind of questions? But you obviously need to do a lot more work on it to kind of answer those questions. But I just think they're fascinating, and I'm going to bang that drum again, and really show the potential of PAS data, because if nothing else, there's just so much stuff that's on there now that we can start to use to really contextualize these things and do deeper research. And that's it. Thank you very much.